Hello?
Hello, go on.
I've started recording now, just as a general thing.
Right, okay. Is this going to go? Is this a pre-record or going live?
It's a pre-record. Because if you decide you don't want this to go out, then it won't go out.
No, I don't care. I do everything live mainly.
Okay. No,
Live.
I hadn't set up a live recording, so I thought, why not do this?
Okie dokie.
Hello, it's a real pleasure to meet you.
Well, and you. And I just let me just position this. So I'm just having a cup of tea at the same time. Let me just drop this down.
Fine.
A wee bit. Where are you?
I'm not going to say.
Oh no, you did. Yeah, you did say earlier, didn't you? Yeah. You
John.
You did allude to it earlier. That's okay.
I get some rather acerbic emails sometimes, and so I have a family to protect, so I try.
Yeah, of course, I get that.
Although you have put yourself on the line far more than me, and respect. Okay, now can I start, because this really surprised me. I had no idea who you were until, all right, the name had sort of danced around on the edge of my consciousness, but I didn't really know who you were until I saw your video about Tommy Robinson being given a rough deal by the police in Centre Parks. Yeah. So first thing I want to ask you is, will you tell everybody who you are? And secondly, why aren't you better known?
Better? Well, it depends what circle. Right, first questions first, right? My name is John Wedger. I'm a retired Metropolitan Police detective. I retired with 27 and a half years service, and I specialised in child abuse investigations and vice investigations. And I came to prominence for my role as a whistleblower for speaking out against a deliberate cover-up of child prostitution or child sexual exploitation. Again, it's not a seminar in semantics. It is what it is. And please don't get hung up on the terminology. It's the actions behind it that matter. But when you go, how am I not well known? Well, it depends on your circles. I mean, I've had 1 million followers per month. On Facebook, I can walk down the street and people will actively come up to me and say, thank you for what you're doing. So ego aside, I like to think that I've become pretty well known, in what I'm doing. But again, it depends on what your sphere of influence and your circle, your social circle is,
It's just that I can understand you being well known on the internet.
Yeah.
And people who know about the internet.
Yeah.
But you don't find the BBC,
No. And I'll tell you for why. When I started this campaigning, I was alongside a woman called Maggie Oliver. Maggie Oliver is the detective from Rochdale and Greater Manchester who went on to become a bit of a sort of media sensation. Mm-hmm. Ended up on Big Brother, and the BBC documentary Three Girls was based after her. So our paths sort of diverted. She went down the mainstream media route, and they sort of abandoned me. I have been in the mainstream media. I've been on the Sunday Times, the Star, the Sun newspaper, and I've mentioned on other media agencies. However, when it comes to interviews, BBC Radio 4 had authorisation to commission a 4-part radio documentary about my work, which got pulled. Channel 4 as well were told to stay away from me. Russia Today were authorised to do a feature about me and then never followed it through. So it does happen, but then at the last hurdle, it always sort of falls foul. But then again, do I need them? I don't know. I mean, maybe, maybe not. But from the response I get when I walk down the street, it's incredible. Now, would I have got that from the mainstream media? I don't know, but I've definitely got it self-made through the alternative media. and it has all been self-made. And, you know, again, not all my credit. I've got to give credit to the people that have assisted me along the way. Bless them for doing that. But we've all done this independently. So I've got a brew of tea. So if you don't mind, I'll have a little...
By all means.
a slurp of tea. But go on.
I had supper in the break before you got to talk to me. I had supper and I had some Prosecco.
Oh, good on ya.
So,
Yeah,
well,
it's Sunday, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's Sunday. But I got an email about 2 years ago from a guy, and it was from New Jersey and New York, and just saying, look, got a lot of respect for you. Thank you for what you're doing. Please continue. And what he said, sorry, I just got flips on the cup. And what he turned around and said was, there's something on the screen to me. And what he said was that I'm a whistleblower myself, and I'm quite well known. Would you like to share a stage with me from New York originally?
Yeah.
There was a guy called Francesco Serpico. Serpico.
Crikey! They made a film about this guy.
Yeah, Al Pacino played him. You know,
right.
So I went and shared a stage with Frank Serpico in Amsterdam in Holland, and yeah, you know, nice to meet the fella because he was a bit of a hero to me as I was growing up. You know, a bit of an influence.
But he was simple corruption, mafia payoffs, and that sort of thing.
Yeah. He's when actually, I mean, to be honest, you should never meet your heroes. And having met him, I wouldn't rush to meet him again. You know, I think his ego is bigger than he is. But either way, a brave guy. But when you look at the criminality that he exposed, well, what did he expose? There was a lot of sectarianism within the police force back then, and you know, mainly it was a Catholic force, the NYPD. However, it was divided, and the Italians wouldn't communicate with the Irish, they wouldn't communicate with the Polish, you know, and the Latinos. So they all had their own little fractions they were working in. But what happened was it's quite clear he didn't like the Irish, and the Irish were heavily involved in really basically just scamming low-level drug dealers, and they were taking payoffs from these bottom end street dealers, and he really sort of peed on their strawberries, as it were. And I think really as an individual, the exposing corruption aside, I think they would have shot him anyway, because I think he was just a pain in the arse to them. But again, it wasn't high level criminality, which is not taking the accolade for it or the limelight for it, but like myself, Maggie Oliver, Lenny Harper, and a whole raft of other sort of high-profile police whistleblowers who've exposed children getting seriously hurt and murdered. You know, which presides over it all.
I want to tell the viewers something. I asked you the other day if we could talk on Saturday night, and you said no, you couldn't because you were working. Yeah. Now, you are a retired policeman. I assume, I may be wrong here, I assume you're getting a pension and running this foundation, and yet you still have to work.
Well, the pension, I had to fight for it because, I mean, when I blew the whistle, I'm one of the very, very few whistleblowing coppers who blew the whistle whilst in post. And I'm not the only one, but I am probably a 1% of those that have done it. A lot of the ones that you see, again, it's not for me to take the pedestal on this or play top trumps in whistleblowing. Yeah. A lot of them, they whistle blew once they'd left. I never. I blew the whistle whilst I was in post, and then, you know, the wrath of these demons came upon me, and they tried to put me in prison on numerous occasions, and the last thing they wanted to do was to pay me a pension. I had to fight tooth and nail for my pension, and I was on no income, on no wage for nearly 4 years, you know, and that was hard going, and I was working cash in hand on building sites. You know, and I got in a lot of financial difficulty. Now, with my foundation, with the work I do, I mean, the person I'm with at the moment will give you testimony. My phone will ring constantly with people with problems. I will help them. I got a call the other day from someone who was suicidal, had some information which was so highly impactful that I had to ring up the team of very loyal helpers and we had to implement a plan that we become dynamic, and we went off and helped this individual. Now that all comes out of my pocket.
Yeah.
So I work. I've got a job that a very benevolent individual who helps children got me working as a porter, a night porter. Again, minimum wage. I also now work with special needs kids, helping autistic children. Again, very low income, but I've got a sense of purpose. And you know, money never has been the be all and end all of happiness. Never has done, never will do. If money's your god, then you better have redemption and choose another god, because it ain't going to save you, you know?
Yeah. The problem is that, most people have the attitude that if you're not making oodles of money, then you're not doing right somehow or another.
Well, it's funny because, especially sort of what I've learned, it's been an education. Every day is an education in this field. And there was a fantastic woman who had a children's charity who unfortunately was shut down. But she was a child psychologist as well. And she was telling me, she said, the lower and the working classes, when there is abuse, the kids end up in the care homes and end up in institutions. She said, but the upper classes and the ruling classes, they put their kids in the boarding schools, which is another form of care. And their kids don't end up in prison like our kids do. Their kids end up in the priory and all that through drug and alcohol addictions.
Yeah.
Because they're damaged. You know, you're taking children away from a loving environment, giving someone else the ownership of bringing them up, and they just sexually abuse them. And it is a disease that is endemic in this country. And it's something I'm studying at the moment for a thesis on why this country is saturated with paedophilia. And when we look at these sacred institutions such as Eton, Radley, Harrow, Winchester, all these posh boarding colleges, schools, which we call public schools. Now, the rest of the world, a public school is a comprehensive school.
Yeah.
And it's called a public school because it was down to the Reform Act, which allowed members of the public to actually get the opportunity to go to these fee-paying schools. So for the rest of the world, they're fee-paying schools. But why was it that in these single-sex schools, and we're talking about girls' schools as well, we're talking about Rodine, but on the boy front, we're talking about Eton, where buggery and caning, whippings and beatings were endemic.
Yeah.
And also what they call the fagging system, where they got the older children, teenage hormonal boys, to have governance of the younger boys. And like someone said to me who went to Eton, said the fagging system was nothing more than a rent boy racket.
Really? I knew it was a sort of... The idea of the fagging system was that older boys got younger boys to order around, and then that taught them how to be leaders in a way. I'm sure it can't be all the time, surely.
Well, we don't know. I never went there, nor did you. But I mean,
no, I went to boarding school.
I spoke to people that have been there, and if we look at children that went to the other institutions, such as Shirley Oaks, Beach Home, all these care homes, and I'm dealing with these survivors day in, day out. So many of them are suffering from mental health problems, long-term drug addictions, a lifetime of institutionalisation in the care. Well, sorry, not the care homes, but the approved schools and then the prisons, because they were raped, they were vaginally raped, and they were anally raped, and they were passed out, and it was endemic.
Yeah, I know somebody who was actually in the Scouts, and the parents, it was a single mother situation, and I think she must have thought this was going to give him leadership or whatever, and it turned out he was being sexually abused along with all the other Scouts.
Well, this is my call out here, and I do this a lot, and I get criticised for it. I was a single parent of 4 boys. I was in my late 20s, and I had 4 children. One of them was 9 months old, and I brought them up to adulthood. No one but my twin sister looked after my children. I was tired. I was worn out. I was still working as a copper. How I survived, I don't know. How I didn't succumb to alcoholism and a nervous breakdown, I don't know, but I got through it. But to look after them children was my job and my job alone. It wasn't it, and no one will look after your children more than you do, or as safely as you do.
Yeah.
You know, and of course, what we're seeing now in society, where children are being put into these daycare centres because the parents have got no option but to go to work. We have a broken society where divorce, even if people can be bothered to get married, is almost inevitable.
Yeah.
Single parenting is at shocking levels. Even the third world shake their head at how lackluster when it comes to childcare. You know, we have lost the plot.
Okay, do you have an answer? Because
I'll tell you what the answer is. That we treat and love our children. We have our children within wedlock. You know, we bring back family values. We go back to being a decent, stable society.
That's the church's responsibility, isn't it?
Well, no, it's our responsibility.
No, but the church is just distancing itself.
Well, look, church, look, religion has got nothing to do with God, and that's one thing I found out, right?
Yeah.
Religion has hijacked the word of Jesus Christ. The amount of sexual abuse that has gone on within religious institutions. I've been before Vincent Nichols, brought up a Catholic, you know, from an Italian Catholic family. I went to Vincent Nichols, a cardinal, right, of the Church of England, the Catholic Church for the UK. He didn't want to know. He saw the church as a victim and not the poor little kids. We had Peter Ball, you know, the Bishop of Sussex, East Sussex, who was just grooming and anally raping young boys, resulting in drug addiction and suicide of his victims, being protected by George Carey, the Archbishop of Canterbury, who is now a Lord. He presides in the House of Lords, who knew damn well, not only that, I've got a campaign at the moment to try and get George Carey removed from his peership because he perverted the course of justice, knowing this man was and this is one thing I've got to say. There's no niceties here, right? If I upset an adult, I don't give a flying shit. I don't care. I'm not here to pay, right, and to make life easy for the adults, right? It's the children that get hurt. We are not talking abuse. We are talking the destruction of a young boy's anus. We are talking the ripping of his intestines, the damage of his spine, so he defecates himself in his adult life. Young girls who cannot have children because their womb has been so badly misaligned by a grown man's penis. We are talking about the destruction of their mental health, so they have a lifetime of servitude to chemical koshes because they can't function normally. We are talking people that end up in institutions and in prison. This is what these dirty bastards do, right? So enough of protecting these people. Enough of saying there's no way Ted Heath did it. How could he have done it? There's enough of saying, well, Leon Britton was a Home Secretary. He couldn't possibly have done it. This is a cover-up on the most monumental of scales.
Well, okay. How did this happen?
I'll tell you how. And we've got to look at the chronology, and we've got to look at the British institution. We've got to look at our love, right? Our sycophantic love of rank. You know, our class system. You know, no, this is Middle England. This doesn't go on, old boy. Absolute crap. We've got to look at people like Harriet Harman, one of the longest serving female MPs in this country, who, when she was an MP in North London, in Islington, was promoting a group called PI, Paedophile Information Exchange.
I heard about that, yes.
To the point where she allowed them at their Christmas event to give a half-hour speech at the London School of Economics. We've got to look at Patricia Hewitt, right? Patricia Hewitt, whose husband is a High Court judge, who was facilitating PI, who she is now a Right Honourable, and was put in charge of child welfare by Tony Blair. Right?
Was Margaret Hodge in charge?
Margaret Hodge as well. Yeah. Margaret Hodge. You know, and we've got to look at every single political advisor. Each one of these politicians has what they call a PA. It's not a personal assistant. It's a political advisor. They tell them the points of law, and how they should behave in the protocol, parliamentary protocol. The last 5 prime ministers, right? The last 5 leaders of this country have had PAs that have either been accused of paedophilia or have been convicted of paedophilia. So this is how this ingrains. And this is why people like, what's his name, Ted Heath, you know, who was deliberately going out and actively procuring young boys, was allowed to get into the highest realms of the political hierarchy. While Leon Britton was the fastest ever and youngest ever promoted Home Secretary. Doing all this under.
Now, I thought Leon Britton was found innocent, but afterwards.
Okay. Well, let's look at this. We have the highest.
No, I just remember that the police apologised after he died.
Well, of course, but okay, this is an argument. We have the highest burden of proof anywhere in the world, beyond all reasonable doubt under common law. We have the presumption of innocence. Do you know this is a fact here? 2%, right, of child abuse sexual allegations result in a conviction. Are we saying 98% of them are liars? No. We're saying that in order to attain that benchmark, which is so unbelievably high, you've almost got to walk on water to do it. We have got a police force that has been eroded to a skeleton. We have got a police force whose government have removed any funding when it comes to child abuse because it's not deemed a priority.
You said that in one of your.
Yeah. So this is why we have it. We have a recidivism rate, sorry, a bit of a tongue twister there, in our prison and our youth institutions of 80%. Yeah. We have an 80%, 75 to 80% benchmark of people in prisons that come from abused childhood backgrounds, not only sexual offences.
Now, I want to stop you there. There's you must know this expression, cui bono.
Right, yeah.
Who profits from this? So when you're looking at a bad situation, the first thing you have to ask is, what's the point of it? Who's profiting from a recidivism rate, for instance, is technically speaking, I would say, bad for society. Okay, you get a wasted life and then you chuck it out into the streets and people suffer because this person is a drug addict or a thief or a burglar or a murderer. And then he chucks back into jail, more wasted life. Who's profiting?
Well, you're always going to get a recidivism rate, right? But when we look at Scandinavia, right, where they have a recovery rate, they have a recovery rate of 75%. But we have a re-offending rate of 75%. Right, their system works. And I said this to one person, right? I said, right, let's give an analogy. And I'm going to give 2 analogies here, right? And this is really the arguments that come up when they turn around to me and say, you know, well, Ted Heath was never convicted. Leon Britton was never convicted. Jana was never convicted. Yeah. Right? Now, if you wanted an extension done in your house, right? And I turned around and I said, right, I'm going to recommend a builder. This guy does work for the government. Mm-hmm. Right? He charges £450 an hour, which is what a barrister charges in a criminal hearing, right? But bear in mind, and I've got to tell you this, 75 to 80% of all the extension he puts up, they fall down. Well, are you going to employ him? Well, no. So why should we be expected to listen to the same bullshit as they give us, right? It doesn't work. Children are a cash cow from cradle to grave. A young child is put into care. The social services get involved. The family courts get involved. Ka-chink, right? Family court lawyers get involved. And then we get foster carers get involved. 50 grand a year for 1 children, you know? Yeah. $250,000 for 5 children. It's money making, right? That kid is it's an assumption, but the ones I spoke to, they don't get treated like they're their own. You know, I brought up 4 kids on my own. The older 2 weren't even mine, right? Everyone got the same at my table and everyone got loved the same. So these people, shame on them when they go away on holiday and they put their foster kids into respite care. Shame on them. Appalling. That kid is not just there to be housed, that kid's there to be loved.
Yeah.
given security. I disagree with this fostering system unless you are a loving individual, And so the kid gets into trouble. So the kid goes to the juvenile courts. Again, representation by barristers, £450 an hour, £8,000 per day per trial, right? And then the kid doesn't carry on, doesn't change his ways, ends up before the magistrates, then the Crown Court, right? And then ultimately they go before the coroner's court and it's game over. And interspersed with that, 75 grand a year to keep that person in prison or in a rehab centre. Whereas a rehab centre independently would only charge 17,000, yet the government don't fund it. It's a con and it's a lie, and it's 75% of the time it doesn't effing work. This is a national tragedy. This is just wrong. And I like to see them argue this. They can't argue this because it's the facts. I met with the BBC and they said, well, John, where is this problem with child prostitution? And I was on the street with them with Radio 4. And we sat down outside Euston Station in central London and I said, I'll show you child prostitution. And I put down the recording device and then we sat on a bench outside a coffee shop. Within 5 minutes, a guy was there begging, wanting money. I said, I've got no money for you, my brother, but I've got tobacco. I always have tobacco. That comes from the police. It was currency. And I've become a smoker because it was a stressful situation. I wasn't a smoker ordinarily, but it's what happened. So I said, take a handful of baccy, no more than you need, my friend, but roll me one up and roll yourself one up. And he went, yeah, okay. So he's doing it. And he went, what are you doing? So I explained who I am, explained who the lady was, and it was to do with child prostitution. He said, you've come to the right place. I said, well, what's your story, my friend? And he went, I was one of them kids from the age of 6 in a care home in Brighton, and I was passed around. I was anally raped, and I'm on the street. I'm a heroin addict now. So for me, that's not an adult. That's a child, a broken child.
Yes,
I see a broken child. Yeah. He said, not just me. My brother's over there. His brother, his own brother, heroin addict, crack addict on the street. He comes over. Same scenario. Boom, boom. And he said, not just us, because we see about these grooming gangs, girls. Me, it's non-gender specific. Boys are used as much as this is my argument with the whole Tommy Robinson Muslim grooming gang thing, which we'll obviously get onto. Girls go, no, it's boys as well. What about the boy? What about the disabled kids who can't speak up and can't fight back? But I'll tell you what, by the end of this, we had 6 people around this table, and the look on this producer's face, was one of horror. And I said, there's your child prostitution. This isn't like a scene from the film Taken with Liam Neeson with these young prostitute children marauding up in little miniskirts. Each one of them was a child, and each one of them is broken and busted, and now a drain on society. Making the streets untidy because they're begging and they're drug dealing, and the broken window theory going on, as Mayor Giuliano says. My education has come from the streets and the rawness of this. There's no niceties and no pie charts and statistics where I'm involved, right? This is hardcore. This is a battle between good and evil. We need to roll our sleeves up and we need to get out there and sort this out. And we need to bring the fight to government, and we need to make people uncomfortable. We need to make them squirm in their seats and not want to hear it, not want to know this. Please don't say this. No, bullshit. I'm not here to make life easier for adults. I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
I'm here to change things, and I think in my own little way I am. I am.
How it looks like you're sort of standing there holding back a tide.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems to me like an impossible job.
Well,
you must have a plan.
What we can't do is do nothing. To do nothing is not an option. In the words of Edmund Burke, in order for the triumph of evil, it takes but for good men to do nothing.
Do nothing.
Yeah, and we can't do nothing. Too many people do nothing. But, charities like the Donkey Sanctuary and all that, they're top heavy with money. They've been barred from taking any money because they've got so many millions. People giving, millionaires giving their money over to spurious charities and cat sanctuaries and, Dogs Trust and things like that. I'm an animal lover, right? But I'll tell you what, you are an animal, you'll get your windows bricked and you'll be ASBO'd and you'll go to prison. You rape a child, what happens to you? Well, not much from what we can see. If you get caught at all, it's wrong. It's we are upside down. I'm not advocating abuse of animals, but my God, Britain, wake up. You know, when people sit there and they've had their houses burgled or their child's been robbed and mugged, well, where have them kids and them people come from? Broken places with a lot of dysfunction, a lot of hatred and a lot of anger. And no more hatred and anger than if that morning someone stuck something up your back passage and you've got to go for the rest of your day trying to process that and work it out, especially if it's someone that you call dad, uncle, granddad or whatever. You try going processing that as an 8-year-old boy. No wonder you're going to be angry. No wonder you're going to take hatred out in the world. You know, and this is what people have to contend with. But we live in a comfortable world, you know, and, you know, but this is their reality. And we've got to get together now.
So what's your, do you have a plan, or are you just being an irritant, you know,
well, what I've always said, I'll be the crumb in their bed sheets, I'll be the stone in their shoe, you know.
Right.
You know, I'll be the mosquito on their back. But I mean, I'm not going to sit and do nothing, you know. We are moving forward, but my God, we're up against it. We are up against it. We've got a big protest on the 16th of May. Coronavirus dictating, which it looks like they'll cancel our, you know, our protest, and it was really an anti-child abuse. But anyone who's lost a child through drug addiction, through suicide, you know, with coronavirus, you know, my God, what is all this about? You know, since when was our welfare their concern? They don't care about us. You know, in the last 100 years, the last century, we've seen 100 million people die in wars at the bequest of our government.
Just a minute, before you go on, I just want to make sure that everybody knows, just in case it carries on the 16th of May at 12 o'clock, you'll be meeting at Trafalgar Square and marching to Downing Street, won't you?
Yes.
And all the details are on the John Wedger Foundation website.
They are indeed, yeah.
Okay, so I just want everyone to know that if they're interested in participating. All right, proceed.
But it's to do with anyone who's lost a child. So this could be through child abuse. This could be through our corrupt family court system.
Yeah.
This could be through forced adoption. This could be through suicide, through alcohol addiction, through drug addiction, through mental health. You know, we look at the suicides, horrific statistics on suicides, you know. How many people are we losing through drug-related deaths? You know, not just through the overdoses, but through the contaminants that go with it.
Yeah.
You know, the mental health, you know, they're failing to fund mental health. They're only funding cancer and diabetes. But
mental health care in this country is really poor. I've had personal experience with that. I know, I mean, not myself, but I know somebody. And it was just impossible to get her any help.
It's
so,
shocking.
I understand that.
You know, the whole thing is just wrong. I mean, when we see what happened, which really compelled me to do this podcast, really for Tommy Robinson, and I know it's not his real name. Stephen's his real name. Anyway. Yeah. But you know, again, I'm not a political animal. I don't want to bring politics into this. I know a lot of...
Just a minute. I want to ask you a question about this, because when we were in communication with each other last week, you made it very clear to me that you were talking about this Centre Parks business.
Yes.
Not because you're a supporter of Tommy Robinson,
no.
but because you could see an injustice, and it was that injustice that was exercising you.
I'm all to do with fairness, right? And this guy's been...
What you said to me, you said something else, and I might have got the wrong end of the stick, but so tell me if I got it. You said you don't want to involve yourself with the Tommy Robinson business because that will hamper you in your attempt to aid Muslim people who, did I get that right?
Yeah, well, because
who might feel that somebody who's for Tommy Robinson is against Muslims. Now, I want to ask you, is there sexual abuse going on in those communities as well?
There's sexual abuse going on in every single community, right?
Oh.
This is not religion specific, you know.
Right.
This is not financially specific. This has got no difference between the caste system, you know, or anything. This is like a hot knife through the butter of society. It cares not where you're from. It cares not your social background, your financial background, your status, your grounding, your religious denomination, your gender, whatever. It don't care.
Yeah.
Right. You know, people say, one person said to me, I know he's doing it, John. It's the Jews and the Muslims. I said, what are you on about, the Jews and the Muslims? No, it ain't. Right. You know, the only secret society we need to worry about are the paedophiles, and which laps over with another thing I deal with, which is Satanism, satanic ritual abuse. So
you mentioned that to me, and I found that incredible to hear of. As somebody who doesn't believe in Satan, it's very difficult to come to grips. So perhaps you should talk about that a little bit more.
Well, whether you believe in Satan or not, you know, it's a by the way, these people do. And it's ancient. Yeah. This is ancient. This is as old as the hills, you know. This has been going on since time began. And, you know, these people worship a negative deity, and they abuse, rape, and they sacrifice children, adults, animals in the name of that deity. They're the antithesis of Christianity. Well, good Christians that are, not the perverted ones, but the good ones. And, you know, they want the destruction of life. And I've met many, so I just got to flip something up. Many victims of satanic ritual abuse. And my God, they are a class apart from other victims. They are so traumatized that they have what they call DID, which is dissociated identity disorder.
Is that where you split your personality into different...
Their minds are fractured. I mean, it is a reality. It's been admitted by the police. It forms part of the police training manual for child sexual abuse. And in the past recent years, there have been 13 cited cases within our Crown courts, resulting in convictions for sexual abuse with a satanic connotation. So, and this is, you know, open source researchable. So it's been going on for a long time. And what they do to children, the trauma they put them through, is it's horrific. You'd go to prison for doing it to an animal, you know, to a cat, to a rabbit, or a dog, or fish. You know, it's horrific, and it fractures their mind to such a degree that they formulate different personalities, and each one has its own characteristics, and they flip between depending on triggers. And it's only really recently sort of been taken seriously. But now it is, and you know, they really are sort of moving leaps and bounds to get it recognised as, you know, as a proper sort of diagnosed disorder, you know. But I feel so sorry for the victims of it, because years ago they just used to intern them in mental institutions.
Yeah.
You know, and they're victims. They've done nothing wrong. They're victims, and some of these. Most of the ones I've dealt with were introduced to it as children. They were indoctrinated into this at early ages, you know. So, and this is a problem, you know. People's ignorance allows this to continue, you know, and their reluctance to accept it goes on, and it does.
Well, I find it. I have to tell you, it's very difficult. When you started talking about this in our conversation last week, it gave me a terrible shock, because. Listen, a few years ago, there was a whole satanic abuse fashion going on, wasn't there? Do you remember? And
they called it the satanic panic. But I mean, you know, all them years I investigated child sexual abuse. I have interviewed many people. Mm-hmm. How many people do you think, when I sat them down in an interview, like a scenario me and you got, And
Yeah.
I said, did you sexually abuse that child? How many do you think went, yeah, I did. Well done, John. You got me. Not many. In fact, a negligible amount did it.
Yeah.
It did happen, but it was so rare, it's not worth mentioning.
Yeah.
They deny it.
Well,
Of course
yeah.
they deny it. So, of course, they just deny it. There is a satanic panic because they're panicking now because their game's up and we sussed them. They've sussed them and we have. And it's not just Satanism. It's gone on. You've heard of a thing called voodoo.
Oh, yes.
Well, what is voodoo other than Satanism with an African and a Caribbean connotation?
Mm-hmm.
The Jamaicans have got one called Opia. The Congolese have got one. Benin, the country of Benin, which squeezed its way between Nigeria and Ghana on the coast of West Africa. That's 70% voodoo, that country. 70% voodoo. It's real, it exists, and it's gone on since time began.
Well, there's a very deeply ingrained belief in many African states, especially around Nigeria. I know that in witchcraft. There's a particular belief in witchcraft. And do you remember the Victoria Climbier business?
Well, remember it. I was on the child abuse team that dealt with it. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah, over Edgware. I mean, if you take countries like, and because it ended up going into Tottenham, and I.
Oh, I just sorry. You had better explain to people because it was a few years ago. You better tell them about Victoria.
Well, Victoria Climbier was a girl that was looked after by, I think it was her auntie and her uncle, and they claimed that she was possessed and subjected her to forms of deliverance, which resulted in torture and sexual abuse. But it's not uncommon. You know, we've dealt with many cases on this unit, and it depended in the areas you worked. I mean, I always worked, you know, quite densely populated, ethnically diverse areas. And one of them was Tottenham. There was a big Congolese community. They were very much into indigenous belief, and it went on there. Jamaicans had a thing called Opia. But if you go over to rural communities, you've got the Orkney Islands. There was a massive scandal there with Satanism. Wales, in Carmarthenshire, there was a scandal involving a high-ranking officer there. There was the case.
An officer? You mean a police officer?
Police officer. There was a case in the New Forest where the chief constable, a bloke called Hoodinot, was named as being involved in Satanism there. I mean, it depends on how deeply you research. I implore anyone, watch my interview with a guy called Wilfred Wong, who's probably...
W-O-N-G?
Yeah, Wong. Yeah, he's an Oriental guy. He's from Singapore.
Yeah.
You know, watch his interview. There's 2 interviews I've done with him. He's the UK's #1 premier sort of satanic investigator. He's been doing it for 30 years. The guy's a trained barrister, a former military guy, very upstanding Christian, and he knows the ins and outs of all of it. We're off next week to speak to a woman who's a victim of satanic abuse, and she's willing to talk to us about the locations. We're getting this more and more. Satanism is like lifting this rock in your garden, and this underbelly is there. And once you lift it up, you can't put it back down again because there is this subculture going on. And so I'd say 50% of my time now, whereas before it was probably 1-2% of it was SRA. Now 50% of it's SRA. It is massive. It is monumentally huge.
And why do you think it should? Look, okay. Is it new or has it been going on?
No, generation. I said this is as old as the hills, time again. Do you know, going about witchcraft, that in Europe, right, there's a country in Europe which has only in recent times has gone on to Christianity, and that's Lithuania. Lithuania was the last standing pagan country in Europe. I can't give you the exact dates. And paganism is still a huge thing in Lithuania. Christianity, Catholicism is a stated religion.
Yeah.
But it's been going on. And they found that a lot of churches are built on old pagan sites. It's gone on since time began. We had Aleister Crowley, you know, and he tried to reinvent with the Golden Dawn and his religion OTO, reinvent all this. You had Anton LaVey in America, where we set up the Church of Satan, where the Satanic Bible in California in the 1960s outsold the Holy Bible 6-1. I mean, it's massive. It is, but see, Satanism is covert. It's clandestine. It's not going to come looking for you, but it's there, and they've all people have all. But the thing is, there's privilege and power, right? In Satanism, right? It's all about privilege and power, privilege and power, privilege and power. You know, and that's why I mean I remember talking, as I did with many cases. You know, policemen are so different to lawyers, and as much as we'll deal with the victims and we'll deal with the perpetrators. And I talked to many perpetrators of sexual abuse, and you say to them, you know, why have you done it? When they do talk, why have you done it? And I was also used to recruit informants. So part of my job would be to go into the prison system and talk to abusers in the prison system.
Yeah.
And one guy said to me, it just gives me power, John. It gives me power. You cannot believe the power it gives you. And he said about a case when he was in a flat and they were trying to procure a young boy. Young boys are favoured. Buggery is favoured over vaginal rape. It's not intercourse, it's rape. They like the boy. They like him under the age of 7. There's a group in America of satanic rapists called 8 is Too Late. And there is also a dark religious connotation where in the Bible it always calls it the age of reason, and it's to do with the age of 7. The age of reason is 7, and it's funny it goes up in these 7-year increments, 7, 14, 21. And our old sexual offences used to go along them lines as well. So if you assaulted a kid under the age of 7, it was a serious sexual offence. Between 7 and 14 was a sexual offence, and above that it wasn't. So we followed these religious guidelines. They've always been the bedrock. We don't just get there; things evolve.
Yeah.
And this guy said that he said, "Have you ever seen junkies wanting heroin?" I went, "Yeah, of course, many times." He said they'd be pacing up and down. They were pacing up and down. They were banging their feet. They were banging the walls with their fists because they didn't have any young kid. And he said, and all of a sudden the phone rang, and this guy procured a young boy. And he said the phone call come in and was told, we've got one, we're coming back with him. He said everyone just relaxed, and it become a mellow, calm atmosphere. And this is what these people do. They are now, whether you believe in God or Satan, like I said, it matters not. These people do.
It's an excuse.
But anyone who has sex with a child is doing the devil's work.
Yes, yeah.
And you're right. There are those that hide behind the peer pressure of Satanism. They maybe do it. No, they did it because they enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Let's get that clear. No one's forced anyone to do anything. They did it because they enjoyed it. Now, what you get is in these care homes, that when they were raping these boys, there'd usually be a party situation, and they would get these kids to rape each other. So the kid then had that burden of guilt on them for the rest of their life. And when you've got the religious care homes, like the Anglican Church, we can't blame all this on the Catholics. It's always the Catholics. No. They all did it. Let's get this right. And, they would sometimes, when they were raping these boys, would be reading scripture from the Bible. So when these kids wanted to get some sort of spiritual substance in their life, they weren't going nowhere near Jesus because they associate the word of God with anal rape.
Yeah.
So, and this is what they do. And of course, men can't talk about this because it demasculates a man. For a man to say that he'd been anally
You mean raped. Male victims?
Yeah, victims.
They can't admit that they've been overpowered in that way.
Well, they've been anally raped, You know, people that come to me, grown men that can't keep down a job because firstly they can't be told what to do because a boss is a form of abuse of power, right? Because they, and also they can't have a job because they defecate themselves because their sphincter muscle has been torn apart. And this is what it is. This is the fact of the matter, what goes on. And they make these children rape other children, so they don't come forward because in their mind they're a rapist. And one guy said to me, "I'm a rapist. I've raped other kids." And I went, "But how old was you?" He went, "Well, I was like a young boy. I wasn't even a teenager." And I said, well, why did you rape him? Well, they made me. They actually said if he didn't rape a girl, they'd go and rape his best friend and everything else. You know, and boom. I've had one woman say to me, right, I've killed a child. I said, what do you mean you killed a child? She said, I've got a baby, a 3-month-old baby, and I slit its throat. I said, well, why would you do that? And she said, well, they made me. Well, explain yourself. Her parents were Satanists, right? And let's get this right. You know, you get people like Jack Black, the actor, and who's the other one? Oh, his name comes to me. All these Johnny Depp and all that sort of praise Satan. Satanists kill children. They drink the blood of children and they rape children. Let's get that right. There is no benevolence in these religions. They hate.
Just a minute, John, I have to ask you this. Are you absolutely sure that this isn't some sort of sick fantasy?
No. There's no way, no way. Right. I've not been to one of these ceremonies, and nor do I want to go to one. But this woman said to me, she said, John, they made me cut the baby's throat. I went, who? She said, the other people. She said, but I was 5 years old. And they got a baby off of a woman who was a drug addict. She didn't cut the throat properly, so they made her do it again because she said the baby was screaming, and she did it. She cut this baby's throat. They drank the blood of the baby, but because she did it wrong, they group anally raped this 5-year-old girl, and then they got a red hot poker, and inserted it into this little 5-year-old girl's anus, right? This is what these people do, right? I've been attacked all the time. I get attacked online, but there's active satanic groups. One was called Hoaxted. I've been attacked by Private Eye magazine and all that, you know, and I don't care.
Why Private Eye?
I think you've got to look deeply about who they attack. They tend to have a history of attacking victims of satanic abuse or anyone who speaks out. And there was one a reporter called Rosie Waterhouse who has a history of doing this. I'm making no allegations against this woman, but please do your own research on her and you'll see why she doesn't want Satanism exposed. And she does it a lot. You know, again, I'm careful when it comes to libel. But why would any, all you said about this fantasy, right? Let me tell you something. People have got better things to do with their time than to make rubbish up like this, you know. And when you meet these people who say these things, they're damaged. They are so damaged and destroyed, right? This isn't someone who thinks, oh, I think I'll have a dig at someone. They're damaged and destroyed because they have to process what they've been through. In all the years of interviewing children, of which I become a specialist to the degree that I used to teach at the Metropolitan Police's internationally acclaimed crime academy, I used to teach achieving best evidence interviews, ABE interviews for children, not just to the Met, but to global police forces. I was one of the main educators on this, you know, trainers, instructors, whatever you call them, right? And part of them, I'd say, all the years of doing it, I dealt with one case of a child who was lying. One case. Children do not lie when it comes to this. They don't. It don't happen.
John,
I'll
tell you something. I'm feeling quite queasy right now.
Well, that's not my intention. But do you know what?
No, I didn't say it was. It's just such a shock.
If this is a catalyst that makes people get out of their comfort zone and do something about it, because someone said to me, "You're not frightened," and I'll tell you something about fear. My fear is nothing. My fear is a little speck of water in the ocean compared to the fear of that little child.
Oh yes.
You know. And you know what? We can sit there and we can have a cognitive dissonance to this, a mental dissonance to this. We can do that, okay? And we can sit back and laugh and go on. But I tell you what, shut your minds to it, close your ears to it, say nothing about it, but it's still going on. Same with child prostitution.
So, John, you were talking about protecting whistleblowers.
Yeah.
And I want, because look, I mean, we've been talking for over an hour now, And I don't want this to go on too long.
It goes
I mean, we
quick,
could
though,
go on for hours and hours. I can see that. But I want you to tell me how you reckon, because obviously you're talking about some sort of structural, well, conspiracy, some sort of structural collusion in this. And you yourself has suffered as a whistleblower. And you said we have to protect whistleblowers. Obviously, we have to make it easier for people to get this sort of information out. So how do we protect? I mean, you were threatened with losing your children, weren't you?
Yeah. Well, they tried to imprison me and threaten me with the loss of my home, my job, and my children, and they came very near to doing it. But my point is to do with police whistleblowers. Now, even the military have got greater protection than the police. The police in the United Kingdom and its overseas territories are not subject to employment law. And we are part of what they termed a disciplined service. So if they take a dislike to us, our hierarchical bosses, they can kick us all over the ring and there's nothing we can do about it. Nothing. And then the next thing they do, and they've got a history of this, is silence us by threatening us with prosecution, which could lead to our imprisonment. Now, anyone who's been in prison knows that bar paedophiles, the second most hated people are police officers. Which is what they want to do. So what I'm pushing for is that police are protected. They are not touched unless the allegation they make is more severe than the allegation the police are making against them, which is inevitably what happens, right? So I was making allegations of malfeasance in the public office relating to the deliberate cover-up of child prostitution, and they tried to put me in prison for a load of old nonsense on 9 occasions. So we want the government to be able to step in, and there's this overarching sort of authority that comes in and gives police officers total and utter protection.
Whistleblowers,
police whistleblowers, right? And that's what I want, because the police know everything. Even I work a lot with reformed criminals, some of them serious and organised criminal stroke gangsters. And I say to them, what were your views on the police? I said, we none of us got any problem with the police. We just don't like corrupt officers. We just don't like that. You've got to have the police, and that's that. They play their game, we play our game. We get caught, so what? Mm-hmm. What they were adverse to was corruption and police stealing their money and beating them up, which has sort of died out a lot now, but it was very, very active when I was in the police, and I'd seen quite a lot of that. Now, I had no inclination in speaking out about that because I wasn't bothered. But when it comes to covering up child prostitution, my word, there was no way that was going on. No way that was going on in my name. I wasn't having it. So the police need us, but again, there is a reluctance when it comes to the special branch. Now, anyone who's watching this from abroad, special branch are really the link between the police and the military intelligence services, albeit that they are still civilian and they are still police officers, but they do that. And they deal with stuff that causes financial and political instability. And as we've seen, when it comes to people like Ted Heath, who was a prime minister, who was raping young boys, with gusto. When you got Leon Britton, who was a procurer and rapist of young boys, high up in Margaret Thatcher's cabinet, as were many other paedophiles, and Tony Blair's and all the others. They're not immune to it. The left and the right, there's no way they're immune to it. But there is no way that they're allowed to get away with this. Unfortunately, it is endemic in this country. It's ingrained into our psyche. It's something that I'm now studying to do a doctorate and a thesis on when it comes to why the UK has got this problem with higher level.
Is it just the UK or other countries?
No, it's a global problem, but it just seems that the UK goes out of its way to protect its paedophiles. It just seems to be, for some reason now, it's a big problem. Belgium, we got to look at Belgium, and I implore any of your viewers to research a man called Mark Dutroux, Dutrous, a handyman stroke drifter who was picking up children, sort of interning them in these little dungeons that he had all over Belgium and using them for sex parties for the elite and members of the royal family. And as was mentioned, also a member of high up in the Catholic clergy for Belgium. And they weren't just raping these children, they were killing them. And the White Flowers Foundation was born out of this because they tried to cover it up, the Belgian authorities. 99 civilian witnesses died in the lead up to that trial. The judge was imprisoned.
What? Say that again.
99 civilian witnesses died in the lead up to that trial.
I did hear of something like this, but 90 civilians, 90 witnesses.
And that is a matter of record, yeah. And so massive was this that they did everything they could. Now, who is doing this? Who is covering this up? At what point is this sanctioned, you know? And who is sanctioning it? And then who is carrying out their work, you know? So 90 civilian. Now what happened was the fire brigade was so disgusted that they took their fire hoses and blew out the windows of the parliamentary building. The farmers sprayed manure everywhere. And, you know, 750,000 was the main estimate. But, I mean, the conservative official estimate was 500,000. Members of the Belgian public took to the streets of Brussels and brought Brussels to a standstill for days. You know, and not many people in that country. And it's a little country, you know.
That's
but
right.
in the UK, you know, we've got that times 10, times 20. I don't know how big it must be in this country, but I'm inundated. I'm sinking with the people coming to me, and I'm just one independent guy.
Listen, what I wanted to say before, I told you how shocked I was by what you told me. How do you sleep at night?
Well, anyone who knows me knows I don't sleep. I am an insomniac. I have a problem. The last 10 years, I don't sleep. I don't sleep. It is an issue. I try and physically wear myself out so I collapse in a heap because my mind is all the time ticking over. I'm not frightened. I believe in Jesus. I'm not a religious guy. I believe in Jesus. Jesus protects the children and Jesus hates the devil. And I've given myself over to Jesus and I say, use me, I'll do your work. Yeah. He's my protectorate. He's my shield. He's my armour. I'm not frightened of these people. I am scared. I have fears like everyone else. But when it comes to fighting paedophilia and when it comes to anyone who protects paedophiles or anyone who trolls those speaking out or goes against them, I have no fear. But no, I don't sleep. It's a big problem. And I cry every day for humanity. I just don't want the children I don't want the kids being hurt.
No.
I don't want it. I just don't want it. I just can't have it.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of stuff I'm not bothered about, but my word, not in my name will they do it. And I want to know that when my day's up, I did everything I could to stop this, or at least bring it to the world's attention, what's gone on. Yeah. And I think we're not far off achieving that.
Okay. Well, John, this has been an education, if you like. I wonder how I'm going to sleep tonight. Look, John, first of all,
let me tell you something, right? Research. Don't take my word for it. Research everything. There's a thing called the RAINS list, and it's an acronym: RAINS. Romeo Alpha India November Sierra. Yeah. The acronym RAINS list, satanic. That's all you got to put in. There's a lady called Spider Cat. If you put Spider Cat in there.
John, would you do me a favour? Yeah. After this is over, send me a few links and I'll put them in the. Yeah, that's probably the best. Meanwhile, I want to remind people that there is a march on the 16th, maybe there is a march on the 16th of May. And if there isn't, there will be some sort of, you're going to do some sort of internet event.
Yeah, we've not worked out a contingency. Yeah. I mean, the way things are going, it's pretty much well timed for the British government and I think the global community in this corona distraction, because we were looking at the British royal family pretty much collapsing because of her children, Elizabeth's children, both of them, you know, both Charles and, you know, what's his name, Andrew, being involved, you know, in either paedophilia or association with paedophiles. We looked at Epstein and his business associates getting out, and then all of a sudden, you know, we've got this and people have forgotten about it. So, you know, it's one of the things, but they probably are going to pull the plug on our march.
Yeah.
You know, I can see that happening, but do you know what? We'll come back and fight another day. You know, there's been people waiting decades for justice, and you know, what do they say? Justice delayed is justice denied.
Yeah.
Now, if we have to reschedule, then we'll reschedule. But I'll tell you one thing: the backing that we've had has been across the board. It's been phenomenal, absolutely unprecedented, and it was looking at being quite an event. But it will happen. It will come back. If we miss it this time, then we're still here. Child abuse, unfortunately, isn't going away.
No.
The cover-ups are still here, but then we're still here as well. And we're sticking together. I'm an ex-policeman. I work majority now with people that have come from the criminal community, right? We've not got a problem with each other. I work with victims and survivors, people with mental health, drug addiction, everything. We've not got a problem with each other. We've all come together for the common cause, and that is just to highlight what this government's done to make the world aware of what the British government in particular have done in respect to the welfare of our children. Okay.
All right, John. Well, John, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me and to whoever watches in on this.
Yeah.
And on the one hand, I want to thank you for educating me. And on the other hand, I think there are things I'd rather not have heard. But then you've got to, haven't you? Yeah. You can't spend your life like that.
We can't. No, we can't.
You know. Well, I wish you well. And I'm glad you've got Jesus at least, because there seems little enough comfort in your life at the moment.
That's all right. But that's all we need. I've got good people around me, good people, solid people, you know, and we keep each other afloat, and we do. But it's all right. Things are looking bright for us, but we've got a mountain to climb. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I wish you well. And if you want to contact me at any future date about more talk or something you want to get out, you know, at the moment my channel isn't huge, but it does get out, and it circulates these things.
Well, God bless you for doing what you do. God bless you, and thank you for having me on.
Thank you, John.
All
okay.
Right.
Good night.
Right. See you later.